So, hello everybody, and welcome to the episode 3 of the Pole Position Podcast. I'm here with Jamie Davies once again, and Jamie, we've actually seen the first race of the season. It's actually happened. The season started of the 2019. I mean, what can we say? Lewis Hamilton didn't win it. I mean,
I know
that's a positive in
great.
itself, and Valtteri Bottas, his teammate, hadn't had a whole win in 2018. His last victory was the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix in 2017. First race of the year, he wins it. I mean, is that exactly what he needed?
I mean, 3 words: Bottas is back. I thought it was incredibly refreshing, even though my eyes were half asleep when I was watching the race on Sunday. But no, I'm absolutely thrilled for him. I think for the F1 fan community as well, they loved every moment. I don't think anyone could disagree with how they wanted the first race to go in terms of Grand Prix results. And I think for Valtteri Bottas, how could you ask for a better start after what happened in 2018? Because he must have, between November and March, in his head, he must have had it all over the place, thinking, right, what is 2019 going to bring for me? There's a driver in the garage right now that could easily take my spot. And then the next question is, where would I go after Mercedes? And, you know, he must have thought, is this it? Is this my F1 career? Is it never going to be better than what I did in 2017, winning 3 races? So I think for him to recover like that, and he meant business, didn't he? Like you know, it's not just by winning a second or two. When you win by 20 plus seconds, that's a statement in itself. And I don't think we've ever seen a Bottas like that before. And I think he's now learning that maybe being the mean guy is the answer to at least beating Hamilton to a few races. Whether it'll be enough to win a championship, we'll see in the next 20 Grand Prix.
Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, he also meant business on Saturday in qualifying as well. I mean, he put in a great lap. I mean, I know Lewis Hamilton managed to pip it in the end, but I think even Lewis had to admit, it was like, oh my God, who is this guy? I didn't have this teammate last year.
I think straight away it was a hint of what's to come for the year, because Hamilton might look at Bottas in the last few years and think he's a great team player and he's helped me out a little bit and helped the team out from getting that Constructors' Championship a couple of times. But yeah, I couldn't believe it when Bottas got that pole at first. I thought, oh, he's nailed it. But then you just saw Hamilton be like the last driver out, and you think, oh, of course he's going to do it. He just always does. It's just typical Hamilton. But I think that just reminds you that if you haven't been watching F1 in the last few years and you've just got back into it, this is how good Lewis Hamilton's become.
Yeah.
Where he doesn't make many mistakes. He rarely retires from races. And yeah, this guy is one of the most consistent drivers F1 has ever seen.
Yeah, well, I mean, Valtteri Bottas at the end of the race was so happy. He said it was his best race of his life. I mean, you know, could you agree with that? I mean, I think it's the best race I've seen Valtteri Bottas put in. I mean, the fact that he was still determined to get that fastest lap point at the end, you know, even with old tyres, he was like, you know, he was even asking whether he could come in with because he had such a big buffer, whether he could come in, put better tyres on, just to get that extra point, because he was like, I want 26 points.
You see, that's the difference between you and I and an F1 driver. They dare themselves to do things, even probably fight a tiger one day, but like I couldn't do that. But it's the fact that I mean, if you told me like I could go in and pit and still win the race without pitting, but I could still win the race by pitting, I don't like the idea of pitting, because I'd look and have flashbacks of Haas from last year and think, now what if something happened in the garage?
Yeah.
I could lose that race and that could change my career aspects for the year. And that's what Bottas was under pressure. So I'm glad he didn't.
Mm-hmm.
It probably would have been fine, because Mercedes are probably one of the best at pit stops. But I'm just glad he stayed out there, but also getting the extra lap. And so getting the fastest lap, because I think it kind of tells us why it's quite a good thing to have in F1. You know, we have it in Six Nations. If you in the rugby, if you get more than 4 tries, you get a bonus point. And that has given teams like England, Wales, and France, etc., the hunger to do more in a match when it probably is already over. You know, it's good for the fans of that team to get a bonus point, because you think, yes, you know, another thing to be proud of after the weekend performance, and that's what Bottas did right there. So I welcome it. I think it's a great idea. I wasn't sure at first, but it's only a point. That's why I wasn't too concerned, because it wasn't a big difference.
No.
But imagine if Bottas won the championship by only a single point at the end of the season. He'd be like, "Wow, good thing I Good thing the mechanics listened to me in that first race.
Yeah, that point was vital, but I think all the drivers actually are happy with it, because I think Max Verstappen said after the race, because he was also trying to push for it, it was like, well, this is 21 points if you get all of them at the end of the season, so it's almost like a race win. You know, it's, what is it, 4 points off a race win, so that they're all like, you know, this is vitally important, so I expect to see, if they've got a big buffer to the car behind, that a lot will be pitted in the last 5 laps, just trying to get that final F1 point. But, you know, Bottas...
Well, I mean, please.
I was
going to say, last season, Fernando Alonso got a few fast laps, I think.
Yeah.
So he might have actually earned more points, because that 5 points to McLaren is like a championship win for them. So, it's the equivalent, so they would have been proud.
I think Fernando will be very annoyed that they've just implemented it this season and not last season.
Yeah,
how dare you?
Typical.
But Bottas, after the race, dedicated the win to Charlie Whiting, who sadly passed away a couple of days before the race. I mean, a shocker to everyone in the F1 world. You know, since I've been growing up, he's been there. He's been doing the races. We've seen F1 videos of the driver briefings, you know, where he's been taking charge. And I love that one where Sergio Perez is getting a lot of stick, and Sergio Perez goes up to him at the end, and they have like a good heart-to-heart. And, you know, he just seemed like an amazing guy, and everyone in the F1 paddock, you know, are surely going to miss him. You know, it's such a shock. I mean, Sebastian Vettel said that he was doing the driver walk around on the track, you know, the day before, and it was just an absolute shocker. But, you know, Bottas thanked him on his radio, saying that, you know, thank you, Charlie. You know, this win is for you and all your work in F1. I mean, you know, it sort of put a downer a bit, really, on the first race, because it was such a shock to everyone.
And it's crazy how, like, they had to get on with it as well, because I remember the press conference that they had before the race, which was on the YouTube channel of F1. It was literally probably just hours after they found out he passed away. But it just, even though it was a sad day, it just looked like a normal day for everyone, because they thought, well, we've got to get on with it. We've got a show to run here. You can't just stop a race weekend. And I think that just shows... You know, I think Charlie Whiting would have wished on that anyway, because, you know, he F1 was his life, it was his passion, and, you know, it is a very sad day that we lost him. And I think you're right about the drivers' briefing, because we don't really get much behind the scenes unless you work in F1. You kind of understand it, and you know these people. They are like your family. I remember Will Buxton, the F1 journalist, did his paddock pass video for the YouTube channel, and he talked about it at the start of it, and he was literally about to cry until the camera went off. You could tell it was hurting him as well. So everyone knew him. He was the man for the drivers, the man for safety. He changed F1. He may look at it and disagree and say, no, I was just doing my job. But no, you changed F1 for the greater good. You know, drivers and racers could go into F1 now, not actually think about dying. You know, it's not like it was 20, 30 years ago when it all changed after Ayrton Senna passed away in '94. So, no, a sad day, but it'll be interesting who takes up his role. It's supposed to be by the time we reach Bahrain in less than 2 weeks' time, but it's going to be a hell of a replacement.
Yeah, I think that's what, you know, a lot of the drivers said. You know, it's like you can't just walk in and expect the respect of the drivers. You know, you have to earn it, and you know, Charlie Whiting certainly did. So, you know, our thoughts obviously go out to his family at this time. But as we move on from that, I mean, you know, we were so sort of hyped at the start. You know, a couple of podcasts ago, you know, the first podcast we did, we were like, you know, Ferrari's looking really good, but what happened? Where were they? You know, Sebastian Vettel was on the radio going, why are we so slow? I mean, I did not expect that for the first race of the season.
No. Ferrari's pace. Where was it? I do not know. It was such a weird race because of that, though, and I never actually heard the Vettel radio until after the race. I don't know if they played it during the race, but yeah, the fact that they published it is clearly showing that even the driver wasn't expecting it.
Well, the team were like, well, we don't know. So that's even worse, isn't it? You know, when they're like, well, we don't know where it is.
Exactly, and what if this year is a year where they go a step back? Can you imagine? It'd be really, really, really bad in terms of competitiveness at the top. So. Wow, yeah, I was quite surprised, but another matter is Charles Leclerc should have finished fourth, not Sebastian Vettel. Yeah. When I was watching that race, I was seeing the graphic at the bottom of the screen thinking, hang on a minute, he's got enough laps here to get right behind him and maybe overtake him on the straight. But isn't it funny how we didn't hear a team radio saying don't overtake, but then the time started to get a bit when he was right behind him, he started to leave a gap. And I was thinking, that's got to be a team order. There's no way Leclerc would just stand back in his first race. And, you know, a lot of people criticised Leclerc as well. Lots of fans saying, you know, he should have overtaken him and all that. But I don't know. I feel like people were a bit harsh on him for his first race. You know, he got top 5. I think he'll take that. It's probably probably his best race since joining F1, but yet again, he's had the car to be provided for it. But Ferrari, I hope that's just a one weekend wonder, because
Yeah.
I want Ferrari to win this year, but if they do that, then I don't know. But hey, another thing, we always say, don't we, how the Ferrari lot are always private. Is it funny how Channel 4 employed Simoncelli, and then they got him on the qualifying highlights, and then they actually ended up getting Bonetto to talk to them after qualifying. I'm thinking, this never happened.
Yeah.
When did John Todd ever talk to the media? When did Ross Bourne actually talk to the media when he was at Ferrari? Or when did Arriva Bene do it? And it was just like, this is fantastic. Like, I know it probably might be the only moment we see, but it's like, yes, a bit of Ferrari aspect for a change, you know, actually being in the hospitality sector, which made me laugh as well, because when they're in the hospitality bit of Ferrari, all those mechanics at Ferrari just eating away, like, you can have anything in this world, but we can't live without food.
Just as they're filming, they're eating their dinner. It's just like, oh, sorry.
I forgot
Got a bit stuff there.
mayonnaise on my. He's like, yeah, so wipe it off, you're on camera.
But yeah, so you know, that's you know, that's great to see that Ferrari are actually looking a bit more like they're going to help the media in showing a side for them. But I think, you know, in terms of you know, that Charles Leclerc's race, I think that, you know, if he wasn't allowed past Vettel, which I think there was after the race, either Vettel or somebody at Ferrari said that, you know, they just wanted to make sure both drivers got home, which meant Vettel was going to finish ahead of Charles Leclerc. But I don't understand that if he wasn't going to be allowed to go past, Kevin Magnussen was like, I don't know, 30 seconds behind Charles Leclerc. You know, why didn't they let him change for tyres and get the fastest lap point?
Well, that's a good question. If I looked at it as a Ferrari perspective, if I was in Benito's shoes, I would have made sure they didn't overtake, because they could look at it and think, what if they do it for Verstappen, Ricciardo? What if they do it for Rebbe and Vettel, where both cars crash out? Because if they did crash out, then there's already a big gap in the Drivers' and the Constructors' Championship. When you actually got to look at the fact that Mercedes were miles ahead of them on the weekend, maybe that's how they looked at it. So I can understand that, but obviously for the fans, you wanted Leclerc to battle it for Vettel. I think Leclerc might be deep down inside thinking, now if I was at Sauber, that wouldn't have happened. They probably would let me overtake. But I think this is when he's going to learn that when you're at a top team, it's tough to become the number one driver when there's someone who's got 4 world championships. Yeah. So it's an interesting question, but there's two sides of it, and I can understand from their point of view why they did it.
Yeah, well, let's just hope, like you said, it's a one-off in terms of Ferrari's pace as well. But what I didn't expect for the first race of the season, you know, after the result of the race, that a Honda-powered car would beat Ferrari to the first podium.
No.
I mean, you know, Max Verstappen getting third, beating the two Ferraris. That Honda power unit actually looked pretty good.
Yeah, it did. I mean, Pierre Gasly, well, I don't know what happened to him. He just disappeared. What a great start to your Red Bull career, Pierre. Great work. Thumbs up. But I was quite surprised. It was their first podium since.
Was it Barrichello?
2008.
Is it Barrichello that got it? I think in 2008.
Yeah, which I did not know that. I must admit, I thought Honda in 2008 had a really bad season, but maybe it wasn't as bad as I remember. But, you know, in all fairness, this is why Toro Rosso tried them out last year, because last year was an experiment. If it didn't work out, Red Bull probably would have stuck with Renault or looked at somebody else. And you got a question now with McLaren Honda back in 2015 to 2017 2017. You got to start to wonder, haven't you? Did McLaren screw it up, or was it Fernando Alonso that didn't want to be with them anymore? While McLaren thought, no, let's stick with them, and then Alonso said, you either get rid of them or I'm going.
Yeah.
Don't know. We don't know that, but that's my theory. My theory is it McLaren not doing their job on their side of things when they were working with Honda, and is it that because Red Bull have always been at the top competing for the last 10 years, they've actually had no real problems with their engines. Red Bull can look at Renault and think, okay, it didn't end well, but you think, well, you were still winning races, you just weren't winning championships. I think you'd take that in terms of a team that's funded by Red Bull, in which, let's be honest, they could leave F1 at any moment, and it could be a completely different team. There was reports a couple of years ago they were going to say goodbye to F1. They're still here. So I think, it's great for Honda, but I think really that Red Bull could look at it and think no real surprise, because that's why they picked them up from Toro Rosso.
Yeah, well, I think, like you said, Red Bull really could put any engine in their car, and I think they'd still be quite competitive because, I think that's what they said their main thing last year, which was letting them down, was their engine. Everything else was fine. It was just that the Renault engine was sort of letting them down. The amount of times Daniel Ricciardo retired last season because of an engine issue. Was crazy. So I also think, like you said, you've got to look at what McLaren were doing in them couple of years. I mean, even last year when they had the Renault engine, which they said was better, they still struggled. And at times of the season they were still at the bottom of the of the grid. So, I'm hoping that McLaren do a little bit better this year. And just actually moving on to that, because Lando Norris, he said after the race that he felt disappointed and he felt that he'd let his team down on his F1 debut, but I don't think that was the case. You saw him in qualifying. He got into Q3.
Yeah, he beat Carlos Sainz to it. Carlos Sainz got a lot more experience, but I think Lando Norris is doing like a Lewis Hamilton there, where he's being too hard on himself. Which is good in a way, because it can help him always be determined to get the job done. But he's got to look at it and think, mate, that was your first ever race weekend. For him and George Russell, and Antonio Giovinazzi, and then you've got Alexander Albon. For them, you've got to just say, look, mate, it's your first weekend. If you do well, it's great, it's a bonus. But you got to just get the experience. F1's a completely different racing format than anything else than what they've done, Formula 2, Formula 3. But I think, he should just look at it and think, Carlos Sainz didn't even finish.
No.
So, I think he should be proud. But I'll say this now. Once Lando Norris gets more experience, and once he gets to that point where he realises he's a good driver, if McLaren can't perform for him, he might go.
Yeah, well, which is scary in itself, really, isn't it? A young driver of his age, who's getting his first chance at McLaren, could go in the next couple of years if McLaren don't perform.
Yeah, but in the past it's been, if they don't perform, then those drivers leave. Stoffel Van Dorn, Kevin Magnussen, Sergio Perez, and it's just like, this is what annoys me about McLaren. Why don't they actually look at their team and realise they're rubbish? It's not just the drivers, but that's what happens when you have someone like Alonso in your team in the past. Yeah,
well, Carlos Sainz, he was the first retirement of the season for McLaren. Having that, I think it was an MG UK or an engine issue or something.
It looked like
it just literally just caught fire. So it
reminded me of Honda that day.
Not a great start for Carlos Sainz, and not a great start for Romain Grosjean. Guenther Steiner said deja vu. It looked exactly the same almost. He went a little bit longer in terms of he stayed on the track a little bit longer. I think it was a couple of laps, was it, before the sort of wheel came off. But it did look almost exactly the same as last year.
I reckon he had the same phone call from what he had in Drive to Survive, where he ended on Sunday's race and was on the phone. He went, we look like fucking wankers. I freaking love that. I'll never stop laughing at that. I love Steiner. I think he's great. Grosjean, I don't think that's really his fault. Him and Magnussen had a great qualifying. They got, 6th and 7th, which was pretty much the equivalent of what they did in Melbourne in 2018. So it's not Haas's fault. Well, sorry, no, it's not the driver's fault, but if the Haas had done that again with both drivers, then that could have been exactly the same weekend as last year. But with Magnussen finishing well, then in my eyes, I look at it and think it's an improvement, but we could still do better with our pit stops.
Well, Magnussen finished with 8 points, didn't they?
Yeah, Haas are getting there. They're definitely a serious team in my eyes now. They're not a pushover. And I've always had a praise for them since day one, because they really do want to put a future in that team. They're not like the Caterhams and HRTs when they don't actually have a proper plan for the next few years.
Well, I'm hoping that they do continue, but yeah, it did sort of. I looked at it and I was like, oh, please, not again. Come on, Haas, please. Especially after
Yeah.
seeing that documentary, which I think Haas actually came off the better team in that, because you saw the passion from everyone in that team and wanting to do well in a sport. And I think they were sort of saying, we are a young team. We still have to improve. And yeah, I think Guenther Steiner, I think he's probably got a lot of fans, more fans from that documentary. I think that's
I think that's what I loved about that documentary, because at first we found out before it was released you didn't have Ferrari or Mercedes getting involved, and at first I was a bit gutted about that, but then I think actually this is great publicity for the lower teams, because we don't get much publicity for Racing Point or for Haas or for, well, maybe a little bit of Renault, but either way it was quite interesting to watch. And I apparently they are filming a second series, so as we speak they're probably going to be filming at each Grand Prix again with those 8 teams.
So Guenther Steiner will be swearing again after that Grosjean incident.
Oh, it's great. It's great, because that's the thing. I didn't know much about Steiner until I watched the documentary, so you definitely learn a few things for any F1 fan.
Yeah. Looking as well, looking at the race results, Kimi Raikkonen in the Sauber finishing 8th, 4 points in the first race. Pretty good for I say Sauber, Alfa Romeo. I've done it again. But yeah, great result and great start for him in his Alfa Romeo career.
Yeah, I think straight away Alfa Romeo, the way they look at it, when you lose Leclerc, they're probably like, oh mama, are we going to do well next year? Oh, hello, Kimi.
Yeah.
Hey, how's it going? I still find it amazing that he's at Alfa Romeo. I still find it shocking to believe, really, because of the talent of Kimi Raikkonen is something not to be missed. A very consistent driver, never messes anything up. I can't recall any races where he really it was his fault. He's just a professional racer. One World Championship, a lot of people could say he could have won more. Yeah, but I think the guy's earned his wage over the last few years. Especially when you look at the period when he left F1 and then he actually came back to win a few races. Not just at Ferrari, but at Lotus, which I think was a massive achievement at the time. So, the way Alfa Romeo will look at it, that they must look at the points that they won last year and think we might get some of that back with Kimi Raikkonen. Giovinazzi, I think, looks quite promising as well. He's another young driver that didn't get top 10, but I'm sure he'll get 1 or 2 moments in the season as well. And he's Italian. Ferrari would love to bring him in if he is a good driver.
Yeah, well, he was defending for his life in that race. He caused a bit of a train, but it just showed that he has got the skill to be in the sport. He was, like I said, defending for his life to try and keep that position, and he hadn't pitted like everybody else behind him, and he was still keeping everyone at bay. So I think that was a good race for Giovinazzi. I know he finished 15th, but I think they must look at it in the team in Alfa Romeo and go, he looks promising, and to have him alongside Kimi Raikkonen is a bonus. But Lance Stroll at Racing Point, he got points. Sergio Perez didn't. Jamie, you're a Sergio Perez fan. Perez finished in 13th. Is anything positive for Lance Stroll from you?
Yeah, a little bit, in all fairness, but when your dad has got the control of the buttons, he's probably going to make sure Perez finishes. I don't know. Maybe. Lance Stroll must have overlapped those Williams cars and thinks, oh, thank fuck, I've lost.
Yeah.
Nothing has changed. But I think it's a good start for Lance Stroll. I think with Racing Point, I think they could still be a very strong team. But we'll see. Sergio Perez just didn't have a very good weekend whatsoever, and I have this really worrying feeling this could be his last season in F1.
Really?
I don't know. It depends really who's up in the rankings at the end of the season. It depends how Racing Point get on, but if Perez has problems getting in top 10 throughout most of the year and Lance Stroll does okay, then Racing Point might just think, why don't we get Esteban Ocon back?
I was just about to say that. How awkward would it be for Perez if Ocon then goes, hi, Perez, I'm taking your seat this season. And he just sort of comes back in.
Well, it's funny because Ocon, I think, was the only member of the Mercedes team that didn't celebrate Bottas' win on Sunday. Did you see his grin? next to Toto Wolff. It's like it's his dog. He's just following him everywhere. So he's like, so do I get a moment this weekend? Am I going to be in the practice car at least? No. Oh.
Yeah, I can see he was just like trying to chat to Toto as the grid was getting back on, and Toto was just like, shh, stop talking. I'm focusing. And Ocon was like, please talk to me. But yeah, I mean, hopefully we do see Esteban Ocon back in the sport maybe next season, or it could be this season, depending on if any drivers don't perform. But speaking of a driver that did perform, Nico Hulkenberg, I haven't mentioned him yet. 7th place for Renault. Not so well for Daniel Ricciardo in his home Grand Prix. Didn't even make the first corner, and his front wing disappeared. I mean, what can we say? I mean, did he hit a piece of grass and then hit was it a bit of concrete on the side, and it sort of I think it was a drain cover maybe or something that just sort of lost his front wing. But he never seems to have a good home race.
No, neither did Mark Webber.
No,
it seems to never have any luck in Australia. And but when I saw the opening start to the race, I was thinking, I wasn't sure if it was him or Hulkenberg at first. But it looked like I thought there was an advertising board that got in the way or something. Then I realised, oh no, wait, he has just smashed up his front wing on the grass. Thinking, you're not gonna. To be honest, I was surprised he got into the pits. It's a long lap round in any circuit for an F1 because you're going a mile or 2 miles long.
Yeah.
So for him to have done that was pretty impressive. But then obviously it started to hit back at him later on in the race. So yeah, for Ricciardo it was not a good one. I mean, he would normally say lick it and stamp it. Well, you certainly stamped it on the grass, didn't you, on Sunday's race? Yeah,
not a great one, but not bad for Nico Hulkenberg getting the points for the team. 6 points for the team. But interestingly, I just want to say this, is that from Nico Hulkenberg down, so from 7th downwards, everyone was lapped by the top 6. I mean,
that's a concern, isn't it?
Yeah, that's not good, is it? Concern. I mean, I thought we'd gone past the days of half the team being half the teams being lapped, but I mean, what can we say? I mean, I know Bottas was 20 seconds ahead of Lewis Hamilton, so it was possibly going to be the case, but it's not great to see when you see the F1 results like that.
I think I'm just hoping, as I'm trying to that's the real challenge for F1 fans after the first race, is try not jump to conclusions. It's a long season, 21 races, but it's hard for me to try and not. But at the same time, I could easily jump to conclusion and think, is it really going to be competitive near the top? Because that to me is embarrassing. You've got F1 teams that can't stay on the same lap. I don't know if it was like, I can't remember, but when I was growing up, I'm sure it was not like that. 20 years ago, I don't think it was like that.
No.
I'll have to look at the race results back then, but that's embarrassing. I can't think of another word for it, because these are teams that, well, what else are they doing? I just don't get it. Like, okay, you need the fun, you need the money to help you get the equipment and the best you can get for a team, but you got to remember, some of these teams are development teams, so they're not supposed to do better than Red Bull, like Toro Rosso with Red Bull, maybe Alfa Romeo with Ferrari, Mercedes with Williams and Racing Point. They're not supposed to do better. So maybe that's the problem we've got at the moment. I like the idea of development teams, but if that means the whole aim is to keep these teams really far away from the others, then for racing fans, that's not exciting.
No, it's not going to work, is it? I mean, we have to talk about Williams. I mean, George Russell beat his teammate in qualifying, so he started 19th over Robert Kubica. But both of them, I mean, George Russell finished 16th because he had 3 retirements of Carlos Sainz, Romain Grosjean, and Daniel Ricciardo. But Russell was 2 laps behind the leader, and Kubica was 3 laps behind the leader. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, we knew Williams were going to be bad, but did we really think they were going to be 3 laps behind the leaders?
I mean, if only I had the failed trombone sound effect.
Yes.
Right now.
Yes.
But it was just. I just don't know. Robert Kubica was.
Yeah.
I just have this feeling he might not make half a season. I don't know.
Do you blame Kubica or the team, though?
Well, I blame the team, but I just think, is Kubica really a racer anymore in F1? Because he's up against George Russell, who's young. I'm not saying he's not good, but he's inexperienced, but George Russell looked a lot more comfortable at home than Robert Kubica did. But, you know, as I said before, I don't want to jump to conclusions because it's only the first race, but wow, if I was Claire Williams, I'd probably want to jump off a cliff because that is just a terrible, terrible start. But yeah, again, are we really surprised? Probably not after what happened in testing because they didn't turn up for the first 2 to 3 days. And they still never explained why.
No.
To this day, I don't think we actually know why. So I think questions have got to come up. The sponsors of Williams are probably going to be wondering what's going on. Why have we invested in a team that literally can't get anywhere? We watched. I mean, you've probably watched the whole documentary now, but that race in Monte Carlo when Lawrence Stroll is sitting next to Claire Williams, and they just don't talk to each other for ages because they realise this could be a really bad season.
Yeah.
This car has nothing to fight with, and Lawrence Stroll, you know, that must be why he left Williams to invest in Racing Point, because he thought, hang on a minute, I can get a seat for my son, but also this team actually punches above its weight.
It's more competitive.
Yeah, and I don't blame him, because if I had the millions on investing, I would be to be honest, I'd be pissed off if it wasn't working out. So for Williams right now, wow, I really don't know. I would love to know. I would like to say they've got a future in the sport because of the name and how big they are, but that is really concerning. I'm starting to wonder if Claire Williams should leave the job.
I think, you know, she was also considering that in the documentary as well last season, wasn't she? She was like, am I the right person for this role? You know, can I do that? And in that space of time, since she said them words, they've lost Rob Smedley and Paddy Lowe. So, you know, they've lost 2 other important figures in the sport.
I think she needs to go ASAP. She's been doing it for 6 years. Okay, for some of them, they were great. They were getting podium spots with Bottas and Massa.
Yeah.
I mean, Massa, I can't imagine what knowledge Massa would have brought into Williams, but obviously, as you mentioned, Rob Smedley was there. I don't know if Rob Smedley left because Massa was not there anymore. Even Massa said, like, his best friend in F1 was Rob Smedley, and I'd imagine Smedley would say the same thing about Massa. So I'm not sure about that. Paddy Lowe leaving's a bad thing. He did a good job at Mercedes. I still don't know why he left Mercedes.
No.
Why did you leave a team that was winning everything?
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, I think at this moment in time, because she's in the family, that's why she got the job. We all know that. I like Claire Williams. I think she's great, but I just don't think. I'm not saying she should leave the team. Maybe she should just not be in charge of it. I don't know. She grew up with Frank Williams. You know, she was in the garage, so she knows how to work in a team. Maybe she's just not the leader for them.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to compare her to Niki Lauda, but do you think maybe a sort of role like that, where she's not the head person that's there at every race, but she's there if sort of they need a helping hand, or you know, something like that, maybe.
Well, I think maybe so. Because I think when you've got a company that's in your family that's been there for generations or for decades, the last thing you want to do is leave it.
Yeah.
I can't imagine any family member wanted to leave it behind for no other fellow Williams. But I think for her, she would want to stay with the team because at the end of the day, that's their money's on the line as well. But maybe having a role like Niki Lauda's, I think she'd probably still be there every race. Niki Lauda's not exactly very well, as we know. But you know, the man's getting old. You know, he can't just travel all the time anymore. So you know, we all love Niki Lauda. He's someone who doesn't like anybody but himself, which is fine because he's just always been like that. That's his character. But yeah.
I love Niki Lauda.
Yeah, he is great.
So, just to wrap up, the 2019 driver standings are as follows. Bottas is leading the way on 26 points because of thanks to that fastest lap. Lewis Hamilton, his teammate, on 18 points. Max Verstappen in third on 15. Vettel on 12, and Leclerc on 10. So, I mean, what do we say? I mean, I know the next episode will probably go in more in depth about the next race in Bahrain, but sort of completely different circuits, really, aren't they, between Melbourne and Bahrain? So, are we hoping for maybe different things, and especially for Ferrari's pace to suddenly turn up again, or?
I hope so. I mean, they've got 2 weeks to sort it out, but 2 weeks in F1 is not very long at all. It's especially when they've got all the travelling to do, etc. as well. But I think this is why, because a lot of races last year there was always a 2 week gap, and I think it might be the same this year. It's pretty much the same calendar, so I quite welcome that because it gives everyone a bit of time to recover. Because there's a lot of work in the space of a week at a Grand Prix. But I hope it's completely different. I just hope Ferrari, you never know. Hamilton might win this race. Vettel might win this race. We could have the first few races where, well, I might be wrong because Ferrari are rubbish. But we might have different winners. When we had that in 2012, we had 7 different winners in the first 7 races, which had never been done before. So we'll see. Bahrain, I'm just hoping it makes it a little bit more raceable, where you've got some of the teams closing gaps on each other. But yeah, we'll see what happens. It's a proper circuit, though, this one. It's an actual race circuit, not a street one.
Yeah, so hopefully we will see some more overtaking than we did this weekend just gone. But yeah, I mean, that concludes the Australian Grand Prix. I mean, Jamie, before I go, if you had to review it out of 10, what would you have given the Australian Grand Prix this weekend?
Probably a 6.
A 6. Okay, well that's...
There were times when I was falling asleep when watching the race.
It was 5 o'clock in the morning, though.
It was 5 o'clock in the morning, but there was moments in the race where I think when you look at every team, it's quite interesting. So yeah, in terms of going for the race win, that was already done, dusted pretty much from the get-go. But in terms of the mid-table side of things, it was quite interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's hope that Bahrain has a bit more overtaking and a bit more enjoyment that keeps Jamie Davies awake for the whole race.
Even though that race is on at 4 p.m. on a Sunday.
Oh yeah, well, they're completely different times, aren't they? From 5 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
I've got time lap, not jet lag.
You've got time to recover in the morning before the race starts. But thank you very much, Jamie, for this episode of the Pole Position podcast. Stay tuned, where we will have the fallout of this, obviously this race we've discussed, and we will talk about the up and coming race, which will be the second race in Bahrain. So stay tuned for the next episode of the Pole Position podcast. Thank you very much.